Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning to another Supatease video. We've got another massive tuning update with some really big buffs in this one, specifically for the War Within on the beta. If you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news and content related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated, but there's a lot to get through, and I don't want to delay this any longer. For Death Knights, you got some very big buffs to your hero talent tree. Deathbringer, Exterminate first scythe hit is going to be buffed by 50%. Reaper Mark's initial damage is being buffed by 300%. And remarkably, this isn't the biggest buff out of all of the classes on this change. 300% is not the biggest. Reaper's Mark stacking debuff damage has also been increased by 35%. Riders of the Apocalypse, though, is getting a nerf with Apocalyptic Conquest strength reduced to 3%, while Nazgrim is active down from 5%. And for Sand Lane, Frenzied Bloodthirst now increases the damage of your Death Coil and Death Strike by 4%, up from 3%. So again, it seems like a lot of the updates in this build were focused around, bringing hero town trees that are performing worse up and bringing down ones that are overperforming and trying to equalize that, as well as baseline talent trees. Now, tank specs all got a nice little juicer here, new little juicer package with damage increase at least. For Blood, it's a 10% damage increase across the board. Bone Storm will now consume up to 5 Bone Shield charges, down from 10. I've seen some reactions to this on Twitter that seem to be negative about this, so I don't really understand this fully. If 10 meant you got a bigger absorb, and now you're not absorbing as many big hits. Bone Storm now lasts 2 seconds per bone shield charge spent, down from 1. So, I mean, it seems like Bone Storm will still last long. I would assume that this, it only consumes 5. Maybe it does less damage or something like that. I'm not sure how Bone Storm functions 100%. For Frost, Glacial Advance's global cooldown is now properly reduced with haste, so quality of life improvements for Frost Scythe and Glacial Advance. You are getting some buffs. Now, Frost DK did get nerfed in the last build, so now it's like you're getting buffed a little bit here, so they kind of bring you down, bring you up, trying to get you into the right spot. Frost Strike and Obliterate are getting 8% damage buffs. Breath of Cinder Ghost is getting a 12% damage buff. Shattered Frost now deals 60% of its damage to nearby enemies, down from 65, so a little bit less AoE on Shattered Frost, but that I think it's going to more than equal out with those buffs. For Unholy, Raised Abomination is now going to cost 1 rune. I don't know if it was free before, but now it's going to cost a rune, so it sounds like it's a little bit of a nerf. An issue with Unholy Blight, applying Virulent Plague to player's current target instead of enemies in proximity, is resolved, so bug fixes. And for Demon Hunters, you are also going to be getting a touch-up and an update here. I'll just drag this over now that we don't have links over there on the top of the screen here, but Eldrachi Reaver is getting some big changes around it, with the Reaver's Mark increases target's damage taken reduced to 7 from 12, Incisive Blade damage increase reduced to 10 from 15, and Fury of the Eldrachi Reaver, though, has been buffed by 40%. So these stacking modifiers were likely really powerful Eldrachi, so it's not surprising to see them targeted. For Vengeance, activation threshold for the Art of the Glaive reduced to 20 soul fragments from 30, and for Fellscarred, your Demon Surge damage is being reduced by 6. However, Focused Hatred now increases Demon Surge damage by 50% when it strikes a single target. Previously, it was 35. Now, in PvP, it's going to be really tough to ever get situations where you're actually able to even hit a single target with how many pets a lot of classes have. So, this is probably just going to be more so a nerf in PvP. Burning Blades now deals 60% of auto attack and Chaos Strike damage over 6 seconds, up from 15%. So that's a big damage increase onto this effect, specifically for Fellscarred. I-Beam is getting a 100% damage increase. That's a lot of damage. A Fire Inside, chance to refund a charge of Immolation Aura increased to 30% from 25. And they fixed some bugs due with their set bonus here. For Vengeance, you're also getting the 15% damage increase as a tank. For Druid of the Claw, this is where the buffs and nerfs come in. And surprisingly, it was Feral Druid, I think, that ended up getting a bit of a nerf. For Druid of the Claw, Ruthless Aggression increases your attack speed by 35%. So Druid of the Claw specifically looks like it's getting buffed. But other changes later on here are going to be nerfs. Killing Strikes increases your agility by 8, up from 5. Strike for the Heart increases critical strike chance and damage by 10, up from 6. And Tear Down the Mighty reduces the cooldown of Feral Frenzy and Pulverize by 10 seconds, up from 5. Now, in PvP, you reset Feral Frenzy with Clone, so I don't know how big of an impact this will have necessarily in PvP with cooldown reduction. For Feral, Ravage damage dealt to its primary target has been increased by 35%. Dreadful Wound damage has been increased by 17%. And Empowered Shapeshifting increases Shred and Swipe damage by 6, up from 3. Wild Power Surge increases the damage of Mangle by 300%. What am I talking about nerfs? These look like buffs. Why was I thinking Feral got nerfed? These all just seem like buffs. Swipe by 75% from 50. Bestial Strength increases Ferocious Bite and Rampant Ferocity damage by 10, up from 8. And Primal Wrath by 60, up from 50. That all seems like buffs. It has to be later on if I'm remembering this incorrectly. Ravage done for Guardian Druids is getting buffed by 35. Dreadful Wound damage is getting increased by 25%. Empowered Shapeshifting increases Mangle damage by 50 up from 10, so some buffs for Guardian Druid. Bestial Strength increases Maul and Raise damage by 20 up from 10. Wild Power Surge increases the damage of your next Ferocious Bite or Rip by 225% up from 100. I don't know how often you're spending time using Ferocious Bite and Rip as Guardian. Unless there's some weird cheesy Heart of the Wild gameplay possibly for it, because that is a pretty big modifier. Still not the biggest. For Boomkin, some bug fixes and also some buffs later into here. For Guardian, though, Lunar Insight increases Moonfire damage by 8 down from 10. They've really targeted Moonfire a lot for Guardian to nerf it. Keeper of the Grove, one of the most talked about hero talent trees right now for Druid. Harmony of the Grove increases your healing by 5% for each active Grove Guardian down from 6. So a little bit of 1% reduction there. Cenarian's Might, though, will give you 12% haste up from 10, and that's a big deal because our secondary stats are resetting to the default start of an expansion standpoint. So any secondary stats that are core in the talents will make your character feel so much better. For Boomkin, Dream Surge is getting a 25% damage buff, which is like the little AoE damage off Wrath and Starfire. Durability of Nature increases your Trent health up by 100%. I don't know if my Trents dying was really a big issue. It was more that their damage kind of sucked. Boundless Bloom now causes your Trents to generate 10 Astral Power from 7, so a little more Astral Power generation. And Harmony of the Grove increases the damage of your spells by 8% up from 6. For Boomkin, flat out 6% damage buff to everything and 60% damage to the melee attacks of the Trance. I don't even know if that's enough. They do so little that 60% is probably not enough. Wild Mushroom is getting a 20% damage increase, and it's generating more Astral Power, now up to 20 from 16. Umbral Inspiration damage bonus increased to 35, so 5% damage increase to that. Denizen of the Dream damage is also being buffed by 10%. Now, they don't do that much. I think they changed that talent so it doesn't give you passive buff either anymore. It's just dragons that shoot damage. So I don't know if that's going to really matter too much. Astral Communion grants you 25 Astral Power now when you get into Eclipse, and it's a passive now, not an on-use. So a little bit of buff there. The set bonuses are getting buffed. You're getting 2% more damage on Star Surge. You're getting 4% more damage on Starfall. The 4-piece is probably still going to be super undesirable, at least in PvP, with Lunar Eclipse and Solar Eclipse increasing Astral Power generation of Wrath by 2. And Starfire, though, by 5 up from 2, which is a little better. But this Wrath one seems really lackluster. For Feral Druid, melee auto attack damage increased by 30%. Why did I think this thing got nerfed? Someone in my chat typed that Feral got nerfed, and now I'm reading this and I'm like, what are you talking about? These are buffs. Rip, Rake, and Thrash buffed by 5%. Incarnation reduces the energy cost by an additional 5%. Ashamane's Guidance effect now lasts 40 seconds after Incarn ends, up from 30. And Savage Fury increases your haste by 10% up from 8, and energy recovery rate by 25 up from 20. These just seem like buffs for Feral. What are they talking about? Guardian Druid, melee auto attack damage increased by 20%. You're getting Moonfire reduced damage, though. And Twin Moon's damage has been reduced as well by 2%. For Resto Druid, Convoke the Spirits will now cast an additional 4 spells over its duration for Resto Druids. But you don't have Boomkin form anymore. So maybe you could use it in cat form. I actually kind of wonder how much damage that could possibly do. Embrace the Dream, healing has been buffed by 50%. Regenesis now increases the healing of Rejuve by 15 to 30. I've seen some Druids getting like really high Rejuve hits, so I'm a bit worried about that. Although there are PvP specific changes that we'll get to at the end of these. Power of the Arc Druid now has a 60% chance to activate it from 40. Tree of Life now increases healing done by only 10 down from 15, and increases the healing of Rejuvenation by 40 down from 50. So that's the trade-off. I think they're trying to make Tree of Life a little less appealing. And Nourish got a 100% increase, but I don't know how Nourish is ever going to compete with Force of Nature talents when Force of Nature has a hero talent tree build that buffs it. I don't know, but it is a big buff. Flourish's duration is now buffed to 8 seconds up from 6. Curious to see if that has any effects on Cenarian Ward uptime of any significance. Rip damage decreased, though, by 15%, but not in PvP. Although Rake damage is, and Shred damage is nerfed by 15%. It's mostly Wrath and Starfire in PvP, but I think they get to that in PvP changes. Ferocious Bite got nerfed by 15%, but not in PvP. So the builders are nerfed, but the spenders aren't. Sunfire damage has also been decreased by 15%. Sunfire was a bit of a bigger issue in PvE than PvP because it costs so much mana. So I don't see that being a big deal in PvP. Fix an issue that caused Mastery of Harmony to gain an extra stack on all targets. Is that not your... No wonder Resto Druid has been so good, man. What? Okay, for Evokers, for Flame Shaper, Consume the Flame will no longer consider increased healing taken modifiers on the target you engulf when calculating its total amount. I don't understand that one at all, but it sounds like an improvement for Consume Flame. Scale Commander. Hardened scales causes obsidian scales to reduce in damage by 10% up from 5. That's a big one. Scale Commander is really good now. Okay. And Augmentation Evoker, they talked about this in a recent update, how they're going to be changing it so it's not buffing allies as much as it has been. I think this is the first touch that they're doing towards that. Ebon Might is now only granting 5% main stat, down from 6.5. So, and closest clutch mates has just been completely removed. So the future of augmentation is looking like it's going to be shifting away from a hardcore support role, and it's possible that they're not going to maybe iterate on that idea too much moving into the future due to how much negative feedback I think that it's gotten at this point. Now Hunters, you're getting a lot of improvements here. For Dark Ranger, Dark Change visual improvements. Black Arrow, I don't know what this means, is displayed as a square. Black Arrow damage though is being buffed by 100%. Withering Fire damage is also being buffed by 100%, and I think they changed the visuals on this. Hopefully it's going to look a little bit more visually appealing. I feel like Dark Ranger is one that needed a lot of attention, so hopefully this one is going to hit it successfully. For Pack Leader, an issue with Den Recovery refreshing duration well below 50% has been resolved, so you're going to be a little bit more durable, I think. Den Recovery now adds the extra duration to targets below 50% health on cost. An issue with Beast of Opportunity not summoning a pet when a target is not selected has been resolved, so you're going to get that pet guaranteed. Now BM Hunter did get some nerfs. I think we are now finally getting into the classes that did get some nerfs. Vicious Hunt damage is reduced by 15%. Howl of the Pack's critical strike damage bonus reduced by 3 per stack, down from 5. For Survival, though, Vicious Hunt damage is being increased by 50%. Howl of the Pack critical strike damage bonus increased to 7 up from 5. Scattered Praise butchery damage increased to 40 up from 25. And Scattered Praise damage buff is applied every cast, was previously every other cast. Now, there is a trade-off because I think they're going to be nerfing your AoE and buffing your single target for Survival, but BM Hunter is just getting nerfed. Laceration damage is reduced to 5%. Kill Command damage reduced by 20%. Hunt Master's Call, Haiti, and Fenrir attack damage reduced by 33%, which I think is the biggest deal. Dire Beast damage reduced by 10%. Melee attacks, pet damage, abilities 10% reduction. Barbed Shot 25% reduction. BM Hunter, I'm a bit worried about where you're going to be at the end of all this. Survival Hunter, you are getting some nerfs, but it's compensated with some other buffs. So Flanking Strike's getting some nerfs, 10%. Pet damage from it is 75%. Flanking Strike and Harpoon now will pull you to the target rather than the center of the target. So it'll give you a little bit of positional advantage rather than jumping immediately right inside of the target. Wildfire Bomb initial damage is being increased to 80% from 40, but overall its damage is being nerfed by 25. So it's more damage on the single target in the initial hit. Raptor Strike damage is being buffed by 5%. Mongoose 5%. Flanking Strike damage 10%. Explosive Shot damage though is being reduced by 5, which is honestly not a lot for how many times you are getting that explosive shot proc, to be honest. So I think Survival is like net positive overall with all of this. Maybe the Wildfire Bomb is actually a bigger change, especially in PvE, but in PvP I think it'll end up being fine. They fixed some bugs with Flanking Strike. And for Mage now, for Frost, Frostfire's Living Bomb multiplier is increased to 175 from 100%. So Living Bomb's getting buffed for Frost, but for Fire I think it's getting nerfed a lot. For Spell Slinger, Controlled Instincts Cleave percent increased to 30 from 20. Volatile Magic damage increased by 100%. For Sun Fury, Arcane Phoenix Area of Effect non-exceptional spell increased by 30%, and also its Arcane Surge. So Sun Fury buffs to Arcane. And for Arcane, Clear Casting is learned at level 10 instead of a level 11. Biggest change of the update. Biggest change. Mastery Savant's Arcane Barrage damage bonus increased by 100%. That seems like a big deal, but I'm not too sure because then they nerf Barrage down a little bit later. But also your Mastery Arcane Blast damage is increased by 50%. Arcane Barrage damage has been reduced by 8. Blast damage reduced by 6. So maybe they're trying to make Mastery as a stat more desirable while reducing the baseline abilities. I'm not sure. Arcane Familiar damage is getting buffed by 50%. Definitely probably worth checking out this talent. Magi Spark now has a 2-second grace period after the initial Arcane Missiles proc, where the caster will continue to echo Arcane Missile damage. Fixed an issue where Magi's Spark damage echo window for Arcane Missiles and Arcane Barrage were shorter than the Touch of Magi's duration. Fixed an issue preventing Energized Familiar from granting mana, and so a lot of bug fixes, it seems like, for Arcane, and trying to make Mastery a little bit more important. Fire, you got destroyed, bro. Lit Fuse, chance to trigger reduced by 4%. Explosive Ingenuity, chance to trigger reduced by 3. And Living Bomb damage decreased by 75%. The trade-off is that Scorch is getting a bit of a buff. I don't care about Scorch personally. The Fire Mage is all about the Living Bomb and the explosion, so that trade-off is going to be probably a big hit for Fire specifically, but I don't think it's surprising. For Frost, Death Chill's maximum stack increased to 15 from 12. Death Chill's spell damage bonus decreased to 1% down from 2. And Ray of Frost got a 20% increase. And Frost has been really good right now, so seeing something like that means that Frost is likely going to be very scary. Conduit of the Celestials for Mistweaver and Windwalker. The healing's being reduced by 8%. Inner Compass now increases secondary stats by 2% down from 3. Temple Temple of Training increases the healing of Vivify, Enveloping Mist by 6 down from 10. So some Nurse of Conduit Celestials. Seemingly for Mistweaver, I don't think that Windwalker gets these bonuses. Brewmaster is also benefiting from the 15% damage increase. For Mistweaver, Yulon's Whisper healing increased by 30%. Jade Fire now decreases the cooldown of Chi-Ji by 0.5 up from 0.3 seconds and increases the healing of Yulon's Soothing Breath by 500% up from 300. Still not the biggest buff of the update. Tear of Morning now increases the healing of Vivify by 10 down from 15. And the locations of Invigorating Mist and Healing Elixirs have swapped. I don't know how big of a deal that talent swap is, but it seems like your cooldowns are getting a bit stronger with this update. For Windwalker, I think there's a lot of like talent redistribution of power. Touch of Tiger now increases the damage of Tiger Palm by 40% from 25. Hardened Souls now increases the critical strike chance of Blackout Kick by 10% from 5. Russian Jade Wind's damage has been increased by 30%. Communion with the Wind now increases the damage of Strike of the Wind Lord by 100 up from 80. Memory of the Monastery now increases Tiger Palm's chance to activate Blackout Kick by 25 up from 15. So this is seemingly all buffs at this point. Zwen's Bond now increases Zwen's damage by 30% from 15. Brawler's Intensity now increases Blackout Kick's damage by 12% down from 15, so a little bit of a nerf. Crane Vortex now increases the damage of Spinning Crane Kick by 30% from 20. Meridian Strikes now reduces the cooldown of Touch of Death by 0.6 up from 0.35. I still don't know if you're going to take, at least in PvP, maybe in the Battleground situation it could be good to get more Touch of Death, but Darting Hurricane proc rate has been increased. Martial Mixture now increases the damage of Tiger Palm by 8% per stack down from 10, but can stack up to 30 up from 12. That seems like a lot more stacks. Chi Burst activation effect now it can stack up to 2 times, and its duration has been increased to 30 seconds up from 20, but Chi Burst damage has been decreased by 20. It's sad that Chi Burst is so strong in PvE but very weak in PvP, because Chi Burst is such a cool little Kamehameha attack. I really hope it gets like a PvP modifier or something that makes it better, because it's just a super satisfying ability, and I actually would like it to be viable in PvP, but because it's so good in PvE, it just keeps getting nerfed. Chi Wave's damage has been increased by 80%. Okay, so you're just always going to play Chi Wave in PvP. What the? Rising Star now increases Rising Sun Kick's damage by 15% from 10. Duration of Fury of Zwen's stacking buff has been increased to 30 from 20. Whirling Dragon Punch now has a slight grace period when it will remain usable, so a little bit of a quality of life improvement. And they fixed some bugs on a lot of the ability and issues with abilities here for Windwalker. For Ret Paladins, for the Avatar of the Sun, or Herald of the Sun, Sun's Avatar damage increased by 20%. And Eternal Flame is 35% more effective on self, so you're going to be really tanky. I think Ret Paladin is one of the specs that's going to slip through and be just ridiculously good. Lightsmith for Holy and Prot. Blessed Assurance now increases the damage of your next Crusader Strike by 20% down from 100. Big nerf to Crusader Strike. For Templar Ret Paladins, Wrathful Descent now deals 100% of the damage dealt to nearby enemies when Empyrean Hammer critically strikes, up from 80. However, Templar Sacrosanct Crusade healing can no longer critically strike. For Holy, Righteous Judgment now has a 50% chance to create a Consecration, up from 30. Blessing of the Dawn now increases the damage and healing of Holy Power spenders by 5% per stack, down from 20. That's a big nerf. It's only 5% per stack down from 20, but they did increase your baseline, but that seems so big. Fading Light and Seal of Order now increases Blessing of the Dawn's effect by an additional 5% down from 10, so it's nerfed again. But baseline, your Word of Glory is just doing 15% more healing, so it kind of offsets that. Maybe you just don't need this talent as much. Light of Dawn is also getting 15% more healing. Hammer of Wrath damage increased by 50%, but its cooldown is also being increased by 3 seconds. Awakening now requires 15 stacks to activate, up from 12, and increases the damage of Judgment by 40% from 30. Tears Deliverance healing is being buffed by 30% and now increases healing taken by 12, so a 2% increase there for yourself. Crusader's Might now reduces the cooldown of Judgment, the Holy Shock, by 2 seconds, up from 1.5. That seems like a big one. Sanctified Wrath now decreases the cooldown of Holy Shock by 50% for its duration. That's massive. You're getting so many Holy Shocks. Overflowing Light now converts 30% of Holy Shock's healing into an Absorb Shield for 15. Holy Infusion now increases the damage of Crusader Strike by 50%, up from 25. And Crusader Strike damage, though, is just getting buffed by 25. Moment of Compassion now increases the healing of Flash of Light by 50%, up from 15, but not in PvP. That would have been a big number to increase. Saved by the Light now activates at 50% instead of 30, but not in PvP. Blessing of Summer now transfers 12% of the healing into damage, down from 20, and transfers 12% of the damage into healing, was 10. So a little more healing on Blessing of Summer, less damage, less importance on this as far as like doing damage with it. Shield of the Righteous damage gets buffed by 25%, probably not a big deal in PvP. Power of the Silver Hand now increases the healing of your next Holy Shock by 20% of all damage and effective healing done by 10. Oh my god, dude. Holy Shock's gonna be so good. Power of the Silver Hand has moved to the final gate. Empyrean Hammer and Inflorescence of the Sunwell are no longer a choice node with each other. The locations of Righteous Judgment, Liberation have swapped. Prot Paladins, you got the benefit of just getting the 15% damage buff like all the other tanks. For Ret, your set bonuses are getting nerfed. by a little bit here. Final Verdict damage is getting nerfed 10%. Templar Verdict by 10%. When I said you guys were going to sneak through, maybe I was wrong. Justicar's Vengeance damage 10%. Hammer of Wrath reduced 15%. Blade of Justice reduced by 20%. Blade of Vengeance, though, has been increased by 25%. Expurgation to 10% nerf. Divine Storm got a 25% buff. Templar Strike, though, 10% nerf. Templar Slash, 10% nerf. Crusader Strikes, 10% nerf. Crusader Strike, 10% nerf. Word of Glory got a 20% buff. You're getting a ton of healing, but lower damage. For Priest, they did some bug fixes towards a lot of abilities. Cauterizing Shadow healing increased by 60%. Fixed a lot of bugs. For Shadow, Empowered Surges increases Mind Spike Insanity and Mind Flay Insanity damage by 60%, up from 25. That seems like a lot for Archon. Empowered Surges increases Mind Spike Insanity and Mind Flay Insanity damage is now reduced by 50% PvP. Okay, so it's completely offset anyway. Perfected Form now increases damage during Void Form by 20, up from 15, and damage during Dark Ascension by 12, up from 10. Oracle, fix an issue, so bug fixes for Oracle. Discipline, bug fixes for Discipline, and preventive measures now increases Penance, Smite, and Holy Nova damage by 40%, up from 25. Preventative measures now increases Smite, Holy Fire for Holy Priest as well by 25, so 10% buff there. For Shadow, Void Blast, you got hit again with an 18% nerf. You're not going to be able to escape as a Shadow Priest with the Void Weaver here. For Discipline Priest, 5% damage buff. Holy Nova, 23% more healing. I don't know how many priests are using Holy Nova. Powered Shield Absorption, 30% buff. Powered Radiance cooldown reduced to 18 from 20. Bright Pupils now reduces the cooldown of Powered Radiance by 3, down from 5 though. Abyssal Reverie now increases Atonement healing from Shadow spells by 5 to 10, down from 10 to 20. Fixing an issue causing Indemnity to not increase Atonement during its correct intended amount. Fixed an issue where atonement healing was only being increased by 50% outside raid content instead of the intended 70. That's a big increase outside of raid all on its own with a bug fix. For Holy Priest, 10% more damage. 30% more healing on Prayer of Healing and Circle of Healing. Healing Chorus now increases the healing done by Circle of Healing by 3, down from 5. Lightweaver now increases healing by 25, up from 15. They fixed some bugs, and Trail of Light is now a 1-point talent. For Shadow, 3% damage buff, 3% guys back. Dark Ascension now increases non-periodic damage by 20, so Dark Ascension a little bit of a nerf. Mind Flay Insanity now channels the same amount of damage over 1.5 seconds, so it's a little faster. Mind Spike Insanity now generates 12, up from 8, and Mind Melt now stacks up to 3 times, up from 2. Mind Melt now increases the critical strike chance of Mind Blast by 30, up from 20. Mind Flay and Mind Sear from Idol of Cthulhu now deal damage 10 times over their channel's duration, was previously 15. Mind Flay and Mind Sear damage of Idol of Cthulhu increased by 50%. And they fixed some bugs of Psychic Link not working on max range, as well as targeted versions of Shadow Crash not properly following their target. Rogues, you're getting some love, but not subtlety. Sorry, guys. Subtlety, I don't know what's going on with you guys, but for Fatebound, additional stacks now increase damage by 2%, up from 1. Fatebound coins, tails damage increased by 50%. Lucky coin damage increased by 70%. Delivered Doom now increases Fatebound tails damage by 30% when striking a single target. Up from 21. Fate Intertwined now duplicates 30% of Envenom critical strike damage to 2 nearby enemies, up from 20. For Trickster, Unseen Blade damage increased by 78%. For Assassin, just 10% damage buff across the board on all your abilities. Your auto attack damage, as well as Crimson Tempest, receiving an 8% damage increase. And Venomous Wounds is going to be restoring 8 energy, up from 7. For Outlaw, you're also getting the 10% treatment. All attack damage, as well as auto attack damage. Killing Spree, 8% increase. Combat Potency now increases energy regeneration by 30, up from 25. Ace Up Your Sleeve now grants 5 combo points when triggered, up from 4, but this will not happen in PvP. And for Sub, you got a 6% nerf on Secret Technique. Sub rogues are just like, what's going on, dude? Because in PvP right now, they're just completely non-existent, at least. So seeing something like that, not going to be the best for you. For Shaman, removed some unnecessary sounds and animations from Stonework. What is that? What were the unnecessary sounds and animations, Blizzard? Was it making a fart sound? Because I didn't notice anything specifically. I'm going to need you to show what these unnecessary sound effects were and animations were, okay? Right away. So a couple bug issues here for Shaman have been resolved. For Farseer, Natural Harmony now reduces the cooldown of Nature's Guardian by 15 seconds, up from 10. And Natural Harmony now increases the maximum health restored of Nature's Guardian by 10, up from 5. Fixing an issue causing Downpour to not cause ancestors to use Chain Heal. For Elementals, you got hit really hard this one. Sorry, guys. Your Elemental Blast damage for Farseer nerfed by 20%, but also later on, you got nerfed. Hydro Bubble got a 200% increase. Still not the biggest buff of this update, but big buff to Hydro Bubble for Resto Shaman, which is a class I'm thinking about maining. We're making a video talking about what classes I'm going to be playing in the future here, but Resto Shaman is definitely one I'm eyeballing. Stormbringer for Ellie and Enhance, Arc Discharge damage bonus decreased to 40 from 75. It's really sad because Stormbringer is not that good in PvP. but it's so good in PvE that it's getting nerfed. It's another one of those cases where like it's probably going to need PvP modifiers. Nature's Fury now properly modifies critical strike chance of Tempest, though. Nature Awakening Storm is now properly modified by Stormcaller and Nature's Fury. Elemental Maelstrom spending requirement to activate Tempest has been decreased to 300 from 400. For Enhance, you're also getting some Tempest nerfs, 20% damage reduction. Ascendant's initial damage is now properly modified, though, by Stormcaller. Tempest Strikes is now properly modified by Stormcaller and Nature's Fury. Thorum's Invocation now properly limits Tempest damage to be capped at a maximum of 5 Maelstrom weapon stacks rather than potentially up to 10 when using Wind Strike. For Enhance, man, Enhance got crushed here. Searing Volley damage reduced by 50%. Searing Bolt damage reduced by 50%. Surging Bolt, though, is now properly modified by Nature's Fury, so maybe this is offset. Is now properly modified by Fire Ice, properly modified by Fire and Ice. Tremor is now properly modified by Fire and Ice. For Restoration Shaman, Earth Surge now increases healing taken by 15% up from 10. Downpour's healing decreased by 20%. Mana cost, though, reduced by 20% as well. Some bug fixes with Chain Heal and Resto Shaman. And Elemental, if you played pre-patch, you're very happy to see these, but unfortunately, I don't think these are affecting the pre-patch. Lightning Bolt's got a 3% buff, but Lava Burst gets a 25% reduction. Elemental Blast, 25% reduction. Earthquake, 15% reduction. Flame Shock, 15% reduction. Thunderstrike Ward, which was completely useless for random passive damage, got a 150% buff increase, though. And Splintered Elements is now only going to grant you 10% haste down from 20. Earthshock damage did receive a 25% buff. Power of the Maelstrom now has a 60% chance to trigger up from 25. Liquid Magma Totem now has a 30-second cooldown down from a minute, though, which is a big deal, especially PvE and like Battlegrounds BGs getting your Flame Shocks reapplied. That's actually a very big increase. Ice Fury damage is also getting an 85% increase, so it's not all loss. There's definitely some buffs here. Earthen Rage, another just passive damage talent, got a pretty big buff, but it was doing nothing, so I don't know if 6% is really enough. Additional Lava Bursts from Primordial Wave now only deal 50% of the normal damage from 80%. So a lot of focus on Lava Bursts and bringing up a lot of the other issues there. A lot of bug fixes as well towards Elemental that they've been working on and correcting. Enhancement, same thing for them with Splintered Elements, only 10% haste down from 20. All healing reduced by 5%, but not in PvP for Resto Shamans. Spouting Spirits healing reduced by 35%. Ancestral Awakening now heals for 25 to 50% of the amount healed, up from 50 to 30. Fixing issue causing spell queuing. Lava Burst after a healing surge to incorrectly consume Master of the Elements when Lava Burst is instant cast. So bug fixes as well for Restoration Shaman for quality of life. This is the biggest buff so far, I think, of the entire update. It was Diabolist here. Fellseeker damage increased by 360%. Chaos Salvo damage increased by 420%. Wicked Cleave damage increased by 830%. And Ruination damage increased by 70%. Infernal Bolt damage increased by 70%. This Ruination was hitting for like 5 million, which is like almost an entire health bar. It got increased by 70%. This is very scary. Very scary, Warlocks. Destruction. The duration of Diabolic Ritual is now 14 down from 20, so you're getting faster rituals. Wither damage is getting increased by 15%, and 35% additionally for Affliction. I think it's because there was a bug with it, maybe, possibly. Fixed an issue where Wither was benefiting from destruction effects of Socrates Guile and Mark of Xavius. So I think this is like a trade-off. It doesn't end up actually doing anything. Blackened Soul damage increased by 45%. Soul Anathema damage increased by 35%. Demonic Soul damage increased by 35%. Wicked Reaping damage increased by 50%. And some bug fixes as well for Soul Harvester for Affliction Demonology. Unstable Affliction got a 45% damage increase. And Dark Glare got a 55% increase. So big buffs to Affliction here specifically. For Demonology, Wild Imp damage 15% increase. Demon Bolt 55% increase. Demonic Core now has a 50% chance to grant a Demonic Core when you've summoned Dreadstalkers, up from 35%. So more instant damage and burst damage onto Demon Bolt. For Destruction, Chaos Bolt damage buffed by 20%. Whereas buffing Warlock, they love Warlock. Shadow Burn 25% damage increase. Conflagrate 25% damage increase. Incinerate 15% damage increase. Ritual of Ruin now, though, will activate after 20 soul shards, up from 15, which is a lot more. Fixing an issue where Rain of Fire could damage enemies through walls. Okay. Shield Slam damage increased by 8%. For Colossus, I think Warrior got some nerfs here. Tide of Battle increases the damage of Revenge by 10%, up from 5. Practiced Strikes increases damage by Mortal Strike by 15%, down from 20. And Mountain of Muscles and Scars increases all damage done by 4%, down from 5. For Prot, Dominance of the Colossus increases damage dealt by targets by up to 20%. It was previously 10. And for Mountain Thane, Thunder Blast damage reduced by 5%. Lightning Strike damage is getting increased by 30%. And Ground Current damage is getting reduced by 25%. Slayer is getting some increases. It's going to look a lot more desirable, though. Slayer Strike damage increased by 100%. Marked for Execution increases Execute damage by 15%, up from 10. Show No Mercy increases Execute critical strike chance and critical strike damage by 15, up from 10. Overwhelming Blades Overwhelm now stacks up to 12 from 10. Fierce Follow Through increases next Mortal Strike and Bloodthirst damage by 20, up from 10. Opportunist increases the critical strike chance and critical strike damage of Overpower and Raging Blow by 30%, up from 10 to 15. Slayer Malice increases the damage dealt by Overpower and Raging Blow by 30, up from 20. So Overpower is getting baseline nerfed by 20, but then it's like more than compensated and buffed by Slayer. So it's kind of a weird change where they nerf the baseline and then make the hero talent tree be what makes that better. Same thing with Mortal Strike being decreased, although this one is likely just going to be flat out felt across the board with it nerfed by 5% up here as well. So some nerfs here for Arms Warrior. For Prot, melee attacks increased by 30%, Revenge damage by 25, Execute by 50, Devastator by 25, Shield Charge primary target 25, and Ravager by 25. So big damage buffs for Prot Warrior, and they kind of needed it. Prot Warrior was not looking very good. For PvP specifically, I don't know why they did this, but Decomposing Aura is going to display the health amount on the target. Not really a big deal. Ravage is getting decreased by 40% in PvP. So we do see some initial hero talent trees getting PvP modifiers specifically. So we'll see other ones get buffs as well when needed. Resto Druid is finally getting the nerfs that it needs. It is a god mode class, and it's finally getting some nerfs. Mastery of Harmony is now 80% effective in PvP combat. That's the biggest one. Wrath and Starfire is also doing 25% less damage. And Moonfire is now no longer buffed by 80%. And with the Trance summoning Moonfire for you passively, it was doing like insane amount of DPS, so I'm not surprised. Ice Lance got a 20% reduction, but it was hitting for 1.2 mil, so it's going to hit for 1 mil. It's still a lot. So Frost Mage is probably, in Ray of Frost just got buffed, so it's probably still going to be crazy good. Denounce got a 20% damage increase. So I'm kind of guessing that like more PvP stuff is going to happen after, because right now it seems like it's a lot of Mythic Plus focus, while they're being aware and conscious of like when they make the change it might affect PvP, and they see those notes on those changes. It seems like it's a lot more heavy focused around Mythic Plus with a couple of tweaks around PvP. I'm imagining that PvP ramps up more so when we get closer to the season actually starting. As I would imagine their main concerns at the moment would be balance for like Raid Race to World First, because that's going to be the big event that starts right away. Possibly Mythic Plus, whereas PvP, you care about the rewards at like the middle end of the season when you're actually getting towards those ratings where you can get them. So I think it makes sense chronologically to focus their attention on those things. But I think it's good that they're also keeping aware of when a change comes through for PvE and doing the appropriate counterbalance here. So if you're a Warlock, this update seems absolutely bonkers. But other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.